Okay, so this is going to be a bit of a long-winded explanation on how to start a business from absolute zero, because I want to cover from first principles of what a business really is and how anybody can start something from complete scratch. And I want to start from fundamentally looking at the bigger picture, like what does a business do, and like if you just bear with me in this kind of explanation, I think you'll find that it will be really useful in the way that it frames things. At least it did for me. Fundamentally, humans kind of like we put money where we find value. At the end of the day, humans like pay for things that are valuable to society. Society compensates. The size of compensation that you get, so like the financial reward you get, is directly proportional to the size of the problems that you are solving, and the value that you create for society. And I want to quickly address an edge case, which is like, oh, what about like drug dealers? They don't, they're not providing value to society, or criminals and things like that. There are some edge cases which don't like totally fit into this, but also a lot of like things that maybe you consider don't add value. Let's say like entertainment, things like that. Like it adds value to some people, and that's all that matters. And those people sustain those ventures and provide that cash. So fundamentally, businesses are rewarded based on how much they help humanity. Now, one of the things which is really important is like, you must in order to start a business, you must do something which helps humans. It helps other humans. If you help other humans toward making their life better, they will compensate you. And I want to bring this into like, okay, we live in very complex cities and life is very complicated. How about we bring it down back to a tribe? Imagine you're in a tribe of hunter gatherers, and there's 5 people there, and you have some like very simple currency. If you are the one to teach them how to farm and you sell farming, they will, like if you know how to farm and you can pay for a crop, like they will pay you all the money because you have made their lives infinitely better. Rather than having to run around hunting and gathering, you can stay in one place and continuously grow, and life becomes a lot easier. And so they pay you for that. That's effectively what we do as a society, and that's why for example, Jeff Bezos made Amazon. Amazon made a lot of people's lives a lot easier, and so as a result, he's compensated enormously for it. So okay, how does this tie into like building a business and solving leads? Like I think a lot about this in my business, but in order for me to find leads, fundamentally, I have to figure out who are the humans whose lives I am improving? How are my actions directly contributing to society in some way? How am I actually helping to create more? And that's basically the question that I'm asking. And that's the question you have to ask yourself in starting any business: is who are you contributing to? And generally, it's easier to solve one problem than many. So you just figure one small way in which you can contribute, and just get really good at making that thing that you're good at a lot easier for the people that you sell to, your customers. Finding leads is just a question of being able to pinpoint where do those people spend their time, and how do you identify the symptoms of somebody with that problem. So a lot of people have different problems. Finding leads is just a question of how do I identify, in the world, let's say there's a lot of people with lactose intolerance. You have certain tools to effectively diagnose that condition. And you must look at the tools at your disposal and diagnose the condition of the customers that you serve, and be able to do that consistently. Now, that is not necessarily immediately easy, but one of the easiest ways is ask your customers, ask people who you'd like to be your customers, just ask them what their problems are. Because that way you actually identify a problem rather than building a business on what you think is useful. Because oftentimes what we think is useful might not necessarily represent what society thinks is useful. It's a lot easier to just ask what others want. If I have a bunch of apple trees but nobody wants apples, I can tell people like that I have all the apples in the world, but if they don't want them, that's useless. A lot of people struggle in building a business because they build something that nobody wants. And so the first thing is you have to find something that people actually want, and that you do that by asking people what they want. And generally, there's a wide array of businesses that exist, And wherever there's a lot of competition, you know that there's a problem that those businesses are solving. So if there's a lot of restaurants, it's because a lot of people want to eat. So if you open a restaurant, you're definitely solving an existing problem. So that part is fine. And then the part of finding leads is just a question of distribution. How do you make sure that you can like effectively tell as many humans as possible that you are capable of solving that problem? And how do you do that when you're starting from zero? There's a framework called Bullseye on this, which is really good, and I'll dive into that in another video. But fundamentally, I think the best way to find leads once you have a problem that you're good at solving is pick 1 to 3 different channels and test them simultaneously. So test them for 1 to 2 months. And when I say channels, I mean acquisition channels, and I will go into what that means in a second. But you basically, there's a myriad of ways that you can get customers. There's this really good framework called Bullseye, which, Gabriel something wrote about it in a book called Traction, the founder of DuckDuckGo. And basically, he said, he pinpointed 19 ways that you can get customers. And it's stuff like, PR, so press articles, unconventional PR where you do some publicity stunt, viral marketing, content marketing, blogs, influencers, social media. You can do cold outbound. There's also other stuff. And you basically, come up with a list of 20 to 25 ways that you can get people. And it can be, don't rule out anything. I could do billboards, for example. Now I'm not going to do billboards for my business, but that is an option. And then list the top 3 of those. So kind of prioritize them in terms of potential and which ones are the easiest to test. Which ones are the channels which are the easiest to test? So easy to test, what you're looking for is it's cheap to test and the test is short. So for example, it's not a lot of money. You don't have to pay thousands of dollars in ads, for example, and you can get feedback or results relatively quickly. It doesn't, when I say quickly, I don't mean 48, 72 hours, all marketing takes time, business takes time, but 1 to 2 months I think is a good time frame. Make a list in order of potential for your business, which one you think is going to work the best. Just, pick the top 3 and do those simultaneously. Do those for 2 months. And actually, that's the only thing you should be doing every single day. A good example might be going to events, physical events, trying to do business development. Business development means trying to develop partnerships with people who have an audience to your potential clients. So for example, if you sell, I don't know, to doctors, then going to a marketing agency for medical professionals is kind of business partner. You make a partnership with them. They have a bunch of medical professionals, and so they give you business. And then let's say cold outbound might be the 3rd one. So those 3 are 3 ways. And let's say I consider these the top 3 ways. I think they're pretty good to start with. Do those 3 as much as you can for 2 months. And bear in mind, this you can only do this once you figure out kind of who your customer is, who you're going after, what problem you're solving, things like this. So do that earlier part of asking and figuring out what people want. And then it's all about finding leads. And you just have to continuously test, but start with those 3. If none of them work after 2 months, switch and take the next top 3 from that list of 20 to 25 ways to get leads. The reason it's good is some of these ways are more suitable and less suitable at different stages of the company. Unconventional marketing might be really hard to do at the start because you don't have a budget for it, but later it might be really good. It's just you have to experiment, but you pick the top 3 and you test them. As soon as one thing works, as soon as one thing drives a lot of traction, focus 100% on that. Drop the rest and just do that. And get, squeeze it like a sponge and get as much of it out as possible. You can get to I think you can grow a relatively sizable business, a small business, with just one customer acquisition channel. You don't need to get that crazy fancy, but you have to figure out what works first. And I think this framework is really good for figuring out what works, which is test 3 things in parallel, do all of them. As soon as one works, drop the rest, just do that. So just gave you a framework to basically figure out a business, which is figure out how to serve something that people want. If you want to make, like, you can look to existing business models, which is what I did. Like, why try and think of a new way, like a new problem to solve? Like, most of the time people, like, the problems don't fundamentally change. Just serve people better. And then you got to figure out marketing. And marketing is just a question of how can you tell as many people as fast as possible. Like, the step two of starting a business is just marketing, actually, because you need to get volume. You need to get customers through the door. And that is fundamentally more important than, you know, some kind of like crazy fancy hiring spree or something like that. That's a mistake that I made. Anyway, that's something I've been thinking about today, and just like the way that businesses work in the wider picture. And I hope that is useful for somebody. Anyway, drop a comment if you have any questions. You know, and if that explanation was a little bit too long-winded, I do apologize. But if I think it's useful to understand things from first principles, like where you actually fit in and how you're doing things and how you're contributing to society and how that works. But fundamentally, you get paid money for advancing humans. Somebody in a job is basically like jobs were just created as these like kind of slots, placeholder slots that said, you know, I know how to help humans. Don't worry about it. Just do the thing that I'm telling you. And most people want jobs because actually figuring out what humans want is an incredibly challenging problem.